Peter, in the last kind of 12 months, we've seen quite a lot of people come out vocally short the renminbi, so betting against the Chinese currency. Vocally we saw the likes of Kyle Bass, who most famously successfully bet on the subprime mortgage crisis. Kyle and his like have come along and said the renminbi is heading to above 8. It's now at about 6.75 to the US dollar. So they're suggesting that it's going to rapidly depreciate to over 8 renminbi to the dollar. Do you see that as a risk in the near or medium term?
Not really at all. If you think about it, a lot of commentary about the renminbi and the Chinese so-called manipulation of the currency is complete nonsense. Of course it's a controlled currency. It always has been and probably will continue to be in the medium term. But think about it. A lot of politicians and so on in America seem to think that the Chinese have manipulated their currency downwards and actually to make China more competitive. In actual fact, that's completely opposite to what's actually happened. If you go back 4 or 5 years, in fact, the Chinese renminbi currency has actually appreciated 25 or 30% against the US dollar. So the Chinese have manipulated, if they've manipulated it, they've manipulated their currency upwards. It's really only in the last 12 months that we've seen the currency drift backwards, down a little bit over that period. Now that's perfectly reasonable. We've seen certainly an increased demand for capital outflow, and the government has directed and encouraged that outflow to some extent, as we were just talking about. Secondly, they have never ever pretended that this is a freely convertible currency. It is not. It is manipulated, it is controlled, and the mechanism by which they control that currency has never been particularly clear in the past. In recent times, it was pegged against the US dollar. So if the US dollar went up relative to everything else, the renminbi went up, and vice versa. More recently, however, they've decided to do what other countries have done, like, for example, Singapore, is they've pegged the currency against a basket, against a trade-weighted basket of currencies. So it's not necessarily going to be allowed to float up and down just with the US dollar. It will float up and down against a basket. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing this. There's nothing sinister about it. It's a reasonably transparent process. And I think that process is becoming more and more open as we go along. So to say that they're going to actively let this currency depreciate by 20% or something like that, I think is just I think that's just totally false. They will not allow that to happen. Also bear in mind, politically and geopolitically, the renminbi is now part of the special drawing rights program in the IMF. Now, if Chinese deliberately pushed their currency down, that would create a huge credibility loss for China on the global economic stage. So they will be highly reluctant to force that currency down or even let it collapse in that way. So I think this is just highly unlikely to happen unless you get some other major disaster like wars or pestilence or something like that. But under anything like normal conditions, that's not going to happen.